want you to just picture this for a second. You are driving down the highway, you're cruising in the left lane, the radio is playing, and you're just minding your own business.
Yeah, totally relaxed, just getting to where you need to go.
Right. And then suddenly this car just swerves right in front of you, like no blinker, less than a foot of clearance. You slam on your brakes, your heart just jumps completely into your throat.
Oh, that is the absolute worst feeling.
It is. And in that exact moment, you immediately think, man, people are just absolutely terrible at driving. And, you probably think you're a pretty fantastic driver by comparison, don't you?
I mean, yeah, obviously. In that moment, you feel like the only sane person on the entire road.
Exactly. But let's actually break down the math on that feeling, because if you ask a random room of people to rate their driving abilities, a staggering 93% of them will tell you that their driving skills are above average.
Wait, 93%. But mathematically speaking, by the very definition of an average, that is completely impossible.
Right. You cannot have almost everyone be better than the middle. It's a statistical impossibility.
Which means nearly half of those people are, objectively speaking, below average drivers.
Right.
But they are just completely blind to it.
They are completely blind to it. And that blindness becomes genuinely terrifying when you look at the real-world data. Take drivers who are over the age of 65.
Okay, what does the data say about them?
Well, statistically, this demographic contributes to a disproportionate 43% of accidents. They are actually 4 times more likely to make unsafe, critical errors on the road compared to younger demographics.
Wow, 4 times more likely.
Yes, 4 times. But when they are surveyed about it, they consistently, and I mean very confidently, rate themselves as the safest, most capable drivers on the road.
That is wild. It really forces you to ask a pretty uncomfortable question about human nature. Like, why is it that the people who are the absolute worst at something are so often the most dangerously confident in their abilities?
Welcome to the Missing Lessons, where we explain what school never did. Today, we are doing a deep dive into some fascinating behavioral psychology to uncover why our brains are fundamentally wired to hide our own incompetence from us. We're exploring the hidden blind spots that make fools feel like absolute geniuses and, ironically, make actual geniuses feel like total frauds.
If you're enjoying the Missing Lessons, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with someone who might find it interesting. It helps us create more episodes and reach more curious minds.
So to really understand this phenomenon, we need to start by looking at a concept called the illusion of competence. It's this psychological trap that basically functions as a dual burden of incompetence.
A dual burden. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, the mechanism works like this. The exact knowledge and the exact skills that a person needs to be genuinely good at a task are the exact same qualities they need to recognize that they are bad at it.
Oh, I see. Wait, so if I'm terrible at judging what makes a good joke, I won't even realize my own jokes are falling flat.
Yes, exactly. Think of it like trying to proofread a highly technical document in a language you haven't actually learned yet. You don't have the vocabulary or the grammatical foundation to even spot the typos. The skill itself is the only lens through which you can evaluate the performance of that skill.
Because you literally just don't know what you don't know.
Right. If you lack the skill, you don't just perform poorly. You are fundamentally stripped of the ability to even see your own mistakes. You're living in a state of unconscious incompetence. Because you don't know what high performance looks like, your brain evaluates your mediocre output and assumes it must be spectacular.
So that's why the guy at the dinner party keeps telling terrible jokes, completely bombing, but he has this huge smile on his face because he thinks he's crushing it.
That is the exact mechanism in action. And when people's abilities are objectively tested in areas like humor, grammar, and logical reasoning, the results highlight this disconnect perfectly. The people who score in the absolute bottom 12%, meaning almost everyone else in the room performed better than them, wildly overestimate themselves.
How much do they overestimate themselves?
They genuinely believe their performance puts them in the top 62%. They think they are well above average when in reality they are at the very bottom of the barrel.
That internal feedback loop is completely broken. And I imagine the disconnect isn't just about harmless jokes at a party, right? It probably scales up dangerously when we look at how the brain acquires information.
Well, it absolutely scales up. In fact, acquiring just a tiny bit of knowledge is actually the most dangerous phase of learning, because the human brain is a predictive engine that just hates a vacuum. That is where the 5% threshold comes in.
The 5% threshold.
Yeah. Being completely universally ignorant about a topic usually makes people cautious. Like, if I ask you to perform open heart surgery right now and you aren't a doctor, you'll immediately say no. But learning just 5% of a topic gives people a completely false sense of mastery.
So they learn a few industry buzzwords, grasp one basic concept, and suddenly their brain says, okay, we have this entirely figured out.
Exactly. There is this amazing behavioral phenomenon known as the made-up words test. When people are surveyed and asked about terms related to politics or biology, they'll casually slip in completely fake, made-up words. Things that sound academic but absolutely do not exist.
And people sell for it.
90% of people will confidently claim that they perfectly understand those completely fake words, simply because they consider themselves to be generally knowledgeable in that broad field.
They would rather manufacture knowledge than just admit to a gap in their expertise. Why does our brain trick us like this?
The core reason this happens is a failure of metacognition. In simple terms, metacognition is your ability to step outside of yourself and objectively observe your own behavior and thoughts. It's that critical voice in your head that taps you on the shoulder and asks, hold on, do I actually know what I'm talking about, or am I just repeating something I heard once?
But when we lack that metacognition, our brains just sort of panic.
Right, exactly. Instead of admitting ignorance, the brain relies on mental shortcuts. We look for patterns that aren't actually there, we jump to conclusions based on microscopic amounts of data, and we end up confidently believing totally misinformed conclusions.
Have you ever confidently argued a point at work or with a friend, only to realize hours later you only knew 5% of the facts? What would you do in that situation if it happened today?
It's deeply humbling because every single one of us is susceptible to this.
We really are. We all have blind spots where our metacognitive oversight just powers down. Which brings us to the inverse of this problem. If the least competent people manufacture confidence, how do the most highly competent people process their own abilities?
Right. What about the smart people? If the least competent people think they're geniuses, what do actual experts think of themselves?
The flip side is equally wild, and honestly, it's often much more tragic. Highly competent, highly intelligent people suffer from the exact opposite problem. It's commonly referred to as imposter syndrome. Truly competent people are acutely, sometimes painfully aware of the known unknowns. Because they've studied a topic deeply, they can see the vast complexity of what they still don't know. It's like the difference between a flashlight and a floodlight.
Right. That is a perfect way to visualize it. When you know very little, your knowledge is just a tiny, narrow flashlight. You only see the one single concept right in front of you, so you assume that's all there is to see. But true expertise is a massive floodlight.
It illuminates this gigantic room, which is great for seeing the big picture, but it also reveals all the dark corners and vast spaces you haven't even begun to explore yet.
Right. And that floodlight creates a severe calibration error in how experts value themselves. Because a complex task is easy for them because they have spent years honing that highly skilled floodlight, they falsely assume it must be easy for everyone else too.
They chronically underestimate their own value. They think they're frauds who have just managed to trick everyone.
Exactly. Let me give you a heartbreaking real-world example of how this plays out. Think about rigorous, high-level science competitions. When you test advanced scientific knowledge, women frequently score exactly the same as men. The objective measurable competence is identical.
So on paper, they are completely equal.
Completely equal. Yet these highly capable women frequently underestimate their own performance. They develop this false internalized belief that they somehow lack scientific reasoning skills compared to their peers. And because of this completely unwarranted self-doubt, they end up dropping out of competitions that they could have easily won.
That is just a tragic misallocation of human capital. We have a society where the most capable people are stepping back, silenced by their own floodlight, while the least capable people are aggressively stepping forward.
Fueled by the unearned confidence of their tiny flashlight, the world misses out on brilliant contributions because the geniuses feel like imposters, while the people who don't know what they're talking about are confidently shouting into a megaphone.
But what happens when you take two completely competent people who both have excellent metacognition, but their brains process information in fundamentally incompatible ways?
That is where the illusion of the fool stops being an internal mechanism and becomes a volatile interpersonal issue. Sometimes we think someone is incompetent just because they process the world differently than we do.
So the friction shifts from internal blindness to external communication.
Exactly. Let's break human behavior down into 4 core personality colors to understand this friction. First, you have the red personality. Reds are dominant, highly assertive, and they make very quick decisions. They want results yesterday. Then you have the yellow personality.
The yellows are the enthusiastic, creative, highly sociable visionaries, right?
Right. They generate amazing out-of-the-box ideas, but they are often scattered. Next, we have the green personality. Greens are calm, incredibly reliable, and the ultimate empathetic team players, but they absolutely hate conflict.
And finally, the blue personality.
The blues are the analytical, detail-oriented, highly methodical thinkers. They need spreadsheets, historical data, and they demand that everything is structured perfectly before taking a single step.
So half the time we think we're surrounded by fools, we're really just completely failing to communicate with a different personality type.
That's it exactly. Let's paint a visceral picture of a typical workplace scenario. Imagine the leader of a project is a red personality. They want to move fast, make a quick executive decision based on gut instinct, and just launch the product. Now imagine their lead analyst is a blue teammate.
Oh no, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. The blue teammate throws up their hands and says, hold on, we haven't double-checked the formatting, we haven't verified these sources, and the margins of error are completely unknown.
So the red leader looks at the blue teammate and thinks, this person is dragging their feet, they're overly critical, and they're ruining our momentum. What an incompetent fool.
Yes. Meanwhile, the blue teammate is looking right back at the red leader with the exact same level of disdain. The blue teammate sees a reckless, unthinking, aggressive liability who is going to get the entire department fired because they refuse to pay attention to the critical details.
But neither of these individuals is actually incompetent. They're both highly skilled.
Right. The red brings vital execution, and the blue brings essential quality control. But because they lack the interpersonal metacognition to understand a different communication style, they both diagnose each other as idiots.
We constantly mistake a difference in processing for a lack of intelligence.
Mm.
It's so easy to assume that anyone driving slower than you is an idiot, and anyone driving faster than you is a maniac.
That is the ultimate trap. And this brings us to the macro scale of why all of this matters so deeply. We live in an era where we are absolutely drowning in information. Because of this access, it has never been easier for an entire population to fall victim to the illusion of competence.
Right, someone can just watch a highly edited 5-minute video, proudly claim they have done their own research, and arrive at dangerously erroneous conclusions.
Exactly. When large groups of people operate with this specific cocktail of high confidence and low competence, it impacts the foundational pillars of our society. It shifts our economy, influences the way we vote, and dictates the policies we support for future generations.
We've inadvertently engineered a culture that rewards loud, immediate confidence far more than it rewards quiet, methodical expertise, which is why we need external scaffolding for our own metacognition.
That is exactly what I want to equip you with today, how you can become better, more self-aware, and actively protect yourself from these blind spots. There are 3 concrete steps you can take right now. Step 1, keep pushing through the learning curve. Outlast the illusion of mastery.
So when you hit that early spike of unearned confidence, don't just stop there.
Right. Keep learning until you drop into what we call the valley of realizing just how much you do not know. The moment you feel profoundly humbled by a subject is the moment you have actually started mastering it.
Step 2 is probably abandoning the internal echo chamber, right?
Yeah.
Asking for constructive criticism.
Exactly. You have to rely on external audits to build your metacognition. This means going to someone you deeply trust and explicitly asking them to tear your work apart. Ask them, where am I weak? What am I completely missing right now?
It will definitely bruise your ego in the short term, but it saves you from being the confident fool in the long term.
Exactly. Which leads directly into step 3. Fight confirmation bias. Actively seek out information that challenges or disproves your current beliefs rather than just validating them.
You have to stress test your structural integrity against opposing views. If your belief cannot withstand exposure to a counter-argument, it probably wasn't a very good belief to begin with.
You perfectly said.
Here's a question for you. Have you ever caught yourself completely overestimating your skills when trying a new hobby or starting a new job? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
It really does happen to the best of us. Today, we've unpacked a pretty massive journey regarding how the human mind operates. From the illusion of competence, to the burden of true expertise, to realizing that different communication styles aren't the same as incompetence.
It forces us to continually recognize the fragile limits of our own perspective.
It does. But I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We have spent this entire time talking about how we judge our competence against other human beings. But as artificial intelligence increasingly takes over highly complex tasks, the nature of human incompetence is going to fundamentally shift.
Oh, that's an interesting point.
In the near future, our biggest blind spot won't just be about what we don't know compared to our peers. It will be our inability to even comprehend the metacognitive processes of the machines doing the thinking for us. Will we have the humility to admit when an algorithm is right, or will our unearned confidence make us argue with the very tools designed to help us? Something to think about. If you enjoyed this episode of The Missing Lessons, don't forget to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us continue exploring the topics school never taught us.